everyone, for listening to Spiritual Realities Podcast, episode number 1. Today, we have a very special young lady all the way over from the UK. She will be sharing her testimony and how she left Satanism and the occult and found faith in Jesus Christ. Thank you so much, Demi, for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm going to go ahead and not many people are familiar with your story. I believe this is only the second time that you spoke about it publicly on a podcast. It was on your first interview where your story really caught my attention. It's very interesting, very powerful, and something much needed. A lot of people need to hear this. I'm really happy and honored that you're open to sharing it on the show today. So I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm Demi, I'm 25, and as you can tell, from England. So I came to faith in 2018, or at the very end of 2018, and I was also baptized that year. And that was after about 6 years of dabbling or in the occult. And so yeah, it's been 5 years since my deliverance happened, but I'm only really just starting to talk about it on a online or on a more open platform. So, yeah.
Yes. Satanism in itself is very diverse in its meaning. There's some Satanists that are atheists, and then there are those that believe in God. And the fact that Satan was the adversary of God and pretty much the king of demons. And believe it or not, even it's hard for others to believe that even with the knowledge of who he really was, some can become so blinded that they can even become attracted to him and worship him. And when I say worship him, I mean in a way that, that they pray to him and follow him and start to like the darker things. As a warning, we should not think of the devil as a myth, a symbol, a figure of speech, or an idea, as this mistake will lead to let others into something that is not good and something very dangerous. We cannot let our guard down. He's very real. So how did your attracted to darkness begin, and what age?
I hesitate to say since birth, but since I have a memory of liking things and having an interest in things, that even though I was brought up in the church, I was naturally gravitated towards things that involved monsters or spooky things. So, if I was even, it was like an innocent thing. So, if I had the TV on, I'd like Scooby Doo or just anything that involved more paranormal things. So, yeah.
Yes. And it does seem like these things are innocent, and that's funny the way the enemy will come in, and he's even, deceiving children, through a lot of shows and things like that. And as you mentioned, even Scooby Doo, like I remember that show, what was it called? I Dream of Jeannie. And I used to sit and think to myself and try to concentrate and move objects and stuff, like them. I just thought it was something innocent, where actually in reality, it's something that is deceiving, and it does put on the appearance of something innocent. Where would you say that it really started, where it started taking more of a serious turn?
So it didn't get to the point where I wanted to actually follow and dabble deep into occult things until I was in my teen years. Before that, it was just very much I would see paranormal activity, and I always had an interest, and I started to see it, and so that was always there. But I knew that to get involved with it was wrong because I was raised in the church. But then when I was 15, I was you're at that age where you're still figuring life out, and you're getting your independence. And my whole life I'd been forced to go to church and to believe in God and Jesus, and I really did, but it just wasn't revealing, it wasn't real for me. I couldn't really see Jesus, I couldn't hear him, but I could see ghosts, and I could see demons. And so for me, naturally, it just made more sense to follow with what I could see and what my experience of spirituality was, rather than what it was for my mom.
Yes, and you said that you was raised in the church, and this was a Christian-based church?
Yeah, so I think I can't remember if it's evangelical or Pentecostal, but it was a very lively church. So yeah, I went twice a Sunday actually, and we was like very involved in it. It's a big part of our lives. So I knew not to purposely dabble in things that were evil. But as I got older, I just felt like that was the best route for me. It could because it wasn't. I thought the church had a wrong understanding of spirituality. So yeah.
And didn't there come a time where you had said something about where you prayed for God to reveal himself to you?
Um. Yes. I mean, I used to do that all the time, especially like when I was 15. I was in a very low time at school, and I would always say like, God, if you're there, please reveal yourself. Just show me you're with me. And yeah, it just all I would get was just visitations from demonic figures. And so to me,
Wow.
I was just thinking, well, if I'm praying, God's not listening, but at least somebody is. And, maybe these like, things aren't as bad as they seem. Maybe they're like God's help as he's sending them. Sure, they look dark in appearance, but that doesn't, I just felt like maybe that's just the narrative I've been fed.
Yes. And in that something where you felt like it was something, maybe not good, but then you would just kind of, push this, suppress that, and think, well, when actually it probably was the Holy Spirit trying to, show you, oh, maybe this isn't good because it's dark, but you wanted to suppress that because you thought, well, wait a minute, maybe it really is something here, maybe they're onto something, maybe this is God.
Mm-hmm.
But actually it really wasn't the God that we know in the Bible. And did you where was it where you oh, by the way, I wanted to ask, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you was in the church. Did you have to hide this transformation from your family?
Yeah, so when I fully committed to giving my life to Satan, and I say that like loosely because you can never really do that because it's not, his
Yeah.
life to have or take.
Yeah.
Um, But when I did do that, I didn't obviously tell my mom, because or, my dad or any of my family just because that was just not allowed and for obvious reasons. And so yeah, I kind of did it in my heart, but I couldn't be too vocal about it because I'd probably get kicked out of the house or sent to Bible camp or something. So yeah.
Yeah. And you said that you were into writing. You was writing stories and things that were dark.
Yeah, so I always had this natural interest in horror, and in horror movies especially. But as I got a bit older, I was like, oh, well, actually, I could probably write my own stories. And so I always enjoyed writing stories anyway. And as I was writing them, they were quite dark, but because I always felt entities around me, I kind of asked them to, this is after I kind of commit my life to, I guess, Satanism, if you like. I kind of asked the spirits to help me if they could, just once. And after that, I noticed my writing got a lot darker. And then I also
Mm,
noticed I'd black out when I wrote. And I didn't realize at the time, but I was actually automatic writing. I knew that it wasn't me writing, but I'd never heard of that terminology. So it wasn't until later I was like, oh, so that's what I was doing, which made a lot of sense because, yeah, I knew that wasn't me writing the stories. I used to zone out and then kind of snap back into myself, reread the story and think, wow, this is so dark. How could
yeah.
I even, make this up? It used to be horrible things.
Wow. And it is something how you can come out of it and look back and you listen to other people's testimonies and things and you're like, wow, that was automatic writing I was doing. But
Mm-hmm.
it is something that's in it, how you look back and you're like, wow, I was actually doing this. I was actually in Satanism is what I was doing.
Yeah, I think I
That's
did. Yeah, I did the same. Like, there's so many things that I did. I guess I didn't really realize how involved I was until you look back on it and think, oh, actually, I was doing all these things that I shouldn't have been doing.
yes.
Um, so yeah.
Wow. That's something. And wasn't there a time you said that where you actually would pray, you know, uh to this entity, to reveal himself or to do things.
Yeah, so I kind of it was a weird situation because still believed in God, Creator God. When I first left Christianity, I explored other religions. I thought because I thought, oh, I've been fed one narrative my whole life. Maybe there's a different religion. So I looked into all the different possibilities, and I even looked at atheism, but I just couldn't get into that. I was like, no, there's definitely God. And also because of my experience with all spirits, I knew there had to be some kind of spiritual realm anyway, and so atheism just couldn't be true. So yeah, I did still believe in creator God, but I also, which was kind of like a good loving being, that's my understanding, but then there's also a darker side, and not which kind of, it wasn't, I didn't see it as bad. So when I tell people, oh, I loved Satan, sometimes your mind naturally thinks to the biblical version of Satan, and they think, oh, how could you like him, he's so evil in the Bible. But for me, he wasn't the person in the Bible, because I didn't believe in the Bible. It was just like he reigned over, he was just the darker energy that, or the darker spiritual realm, and God created, God was the good spiritual realm, and neither were bad. You needed both to balance themselves out. And so when I prayed, I kind of prayed to God for like the good stuff and the blessings, and I prayed to like Satan to help me with things like writing and with my clairvoyancy. Well, I thought I was clairvoyant. I used to get visions and things, and so I used to help him with that. Used to ask him to help me with that. So yeah, I used to pray to both. And
Yeah. Your testimony is a very good, it shows how when people go to church and they're a Christian, how they can let life experiences, people can deviate from the Bible, and they can get their own, and they let experiences and stuff do that for them, when really we shouldn't do that. That's where we get in trouble. And
yeah.
a lot of people don't realize how important the Bible is. And when I was going to church when I was younger and everything, that was the one thing I was missing. I didn't go into the Bible. I was given Bibles, for like birthdays or, as gifts, but I never got into it. I didn't think it was that important. I just thought my attendance in church, and I would pray, and things like that. But still, I was deviating from what the Bible says, doing things that God abhors, and everything. But we can really get in trouble with that. And I'm sure you did too. I think you even mentioned there was a time where your health even started deteriorating.
Yeah, so that was kind of towards the end, really. So yeah, I dabbled in the occult for about 6 years, and I was happy. I mean, I say happy. I was depressed and suicidal, but I didn't. It wasn't. I didn't see it as the occult doing that to me. I just thought that was me just not, having a low view of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was perfectly happy with who I was, like in terms of being a dark person. And my appearance was dark. I had piercings in my face and always wearing black and things like that. And I was at university studying writing, but with a focus on horror writing. And I really liked it. That was my whole identity. That's all I'd known. So I had no intentions of leaving until my health started to get really bad. And yeah, and again, I still didn't link that to the occult until my deliverance happened.
Wow. That's something. And didn't you experience like was it sort of like symptoms of anorexia?
Yeah,
Anorexia?
yeah, I was anorexic, so my health just was deteriorating over the space of a year, and I went to hospital and they did every test. I was constantly, the first year of university, in and out of hospital, had every test imaginable. And the doctors were so confused because they could see I was ill, because no matter how much, and I loved food and I would want to eat it, but every time I put it in my mouth, I couldn't stomach it. I'd throw up. And so naturally, I became very skinny to the point where I was anorexic. And so the doctors could see I was ill, and they could see bruises all over my body, and I was coughing up fresh blood most mornings, and get rushed to the doctors, rushed to the hospital, have scans on my lungs, again all clear, and my vision was going, nosebleeds and bruises all over my body. And they're like, yes,
Wow.
we can see that you are very, very ill, but we don't know how to help you. You've had every test, that we can give you. And in the end, they told me to like basically go home from uni and just be with my family, because, and so I kind of took that as, I'm going to go home to die, basically, because there's nothing else they can do.
Oh,
And I even have I wrote that like on a note on my phone saying like, yeah, I'm going to die this year.
I mean, it's really sad. Actually, I've heard of so many stories of people where they actually come to a point of suicide where they felt complete hopelessness and depression and things like that. And the enemy is here to steal, kill, and destroy, and that's what
Mhm.
he's out to do. And it sounds like he was really working on you
Yeah.
and everything. Can you share with us any time where you actually felt so low that you felt suicidal? What did
Hmm.
you feel like was so bad? You know what I mean? That brought you to that
Yeah, to
place.
suicide. Well,
Yeah.
I attempted suicide a few times when I was, I think, between 15 and 16. And I think that was just because I had such a low view of myself. I couldn't stand. I think I was suffering from, and I was never diagnosed, but I think I was suffering from some kind of body dysmorphia because I really just hated my appearance. I hated myself, everything
Wow.
about myself. And I
Wow.
just thought I was better off dead. And then every time I'd have nightmares, or every single night I had nightmares for 21 years. And it would be like demonic entities telling me I'm going to hell, that I deserve to die, that I belong with them. And so that was kind of like my night, like as I was asleep. And then when I woke up in the day, I'd have like these voices saying, you're worthless, you need to die, and things like that. And
Mm.
so naturally, I wanted to harm myself. I felt like I deserved to die. And
Oh.
so that's how like self-harm was involved. And then later on, as I kind of wanted to stop that, I turned to alcohol instead because just the voices of these demonic entities was so, it was a bit like, I describe it as Jekyll and Hyde, how you kind of have the logical side. I had this logical side of me that, grew up in the church and had like a strong morality of what was right and wrong. And
Yeah.
yet I had this, um, overbearing other person is what it felt like. And I did even question at times, is there
Yeah.
something inside of me? Because it felt like I literally had someone else inside of me, just
Mm.
constantly screaming
Yeah.
profanities. And it was just, and it felt, and I heard like this demonic voice, and it was horrible. And so I just wanted to get away from that, really. It was tiring. It was a battle every day. I was tormented really badly.
And I heard in your testimony where you mentioned that there was a time where you started to blaspheme Jesus. Can you
Hmm.
explain and talk a little about that?
Yeah, so that was interesting. And like I said, I even picked up on that because although I rejected Christianity and its teachings, I I still like believed in fairness and being fair to people and
Okay.
doing things that were truthful. And so when I looked at the character of Jesus, I thought, well, actually, he was a very nice man. Whether he was Jesus, or, sorry, whether he was God or not is a different debate. But he was still a very wise and loving person and a good role model. So I didn't understand why I had so much hatred towards him. And so it got to the point where, because up until 18, I was forced to go to church. And so my mom, I'd have to stand up when we were singing songs and mime to them. But
Yeah.
every time there was like Jesus, I swore over his name and I had to. And I didn't know why I did that because I was still very conservative in my ways and I didn't like swearing at all. I thought it was very, unladylike. But
Yeah.
I just had to spew over his name. I couldn't control it. And every time I got drunk, apparently, like I used to, because I used to black out, so I can't always remember when I was drunk. But my friends used to say I was that vulgar about Christianity and Jesus that
Mm.
and they were atheists. They even said like, okay, you need to calm down. But it was just like
Wow.
something inside. It would trigger something inside of me of hatred, pure hatred against his name. And even then, like when I would think about it, I think, Demi, stop doing that. Like, why do you do that? But I just had no control over it.
Yes. Yes. And where you also explained the blackouts, and
Hmm.
that is a big sign of possession.
Hmm.
I've had a lot of people. I've prayed with people, that have experience with demonic possession, and pray deliverance with them. And that is one of the big telltale signs, that someone is possessed. Not always, of course, but that is one of the things that they have blackouts that they can't remember, or they do
Hmm.
things that other people will tell them, of things that they did when they were blacked out. And
Yeah.
sure enough, that's exactly what it was. So, wow, that's something. And not to even know, what's going on. But another thing, did you used to have what they call sleep paralysis?
Yeah, so interesting enough, I only ever experienced sleep paralysis once, and that was after my deliverance. But
Oh.
before that, I used to get nightmares every single night, and I used to lucid dream a lot as well. And I don't know too much about that and the implications of that in the spirit realm, but I just know that I used to do that a lot, and I don't do it anymore. So I found that interesting. But I had more visitations, like actually in the day rather than when I went to bed at night. So.
Wow. And didn't you say that sometimes they would, when you would have dreams, they would tell you that, yeah, I mean, they would, what you thought they were taking you to hell?
Yeah, they would tell me they'd take me to hell, and especially
Mm,
this one particular demon that visited me in my room that I physically saw. How he looked a little bit like the Grim Reaper. He had like it was kind of like hooded, like a cloak, black cloak, very pale white face,
yeah.
and he would always be in my dreams. After I saw him that night, he was there every night, like telling me I'm going to go to hell and things. And
Oh,
actually, interestingly enough, when I kind of Googled him and his features, I found a lot of other Christians saying that they saw him. So, because I saw him at the time where I was just kind of leaving Christianity, and so I just found that interesting how a lot of Christians said they saw him. So I don't know what the link is there.
yeah.
But yeah, so after I kind of saw him, that's when things got worse. So one night I woke up to being strangled by
Mm,
like the on my blind, like as you do the blinds, I don't know what it's called, like the beads that you pull it up with. It's kind of like a noose shape, and that was pulled tight over my neck. Um,
wow.
and I woke up choking. And then other nights, my alarm would go off at 3:07, which was the time that I saw that shadow figure in my room. And I couldn't turn the alarm off. I'd have to turn the device off. And in the morning, obviously, I would check to think, why on earth would I set an alarm at that time? And there was nothing set. I'd constantly always hear my name called in the house. So just for years, like I was just tormented by spirits. They very much made their presence known, which at first was like a bit freaky, but over time I kind of got used to it. Like they were in a weird way my friends, and yeah, it felt weird if they were not there. So
Wow.
I kind of just felt like their visitations came with the territory of being kind of like a clairvoyant or a psychic or a writer, just anything like that. Like I knew that I was like involved in dark spiritual things, and obviously I knew
Yes.
that they come with the territory, so they didn't scare me in that sense.
Yes. Um, we had, I discussed this with some other people where, you know, where I was involved in the occult, with ghost hunting. But
Mhm.
at the time, I didn't see it for what it really was. So when I would go into like a bookstore and I would go over to the books about ghosts and things, here they were sitting right next to a Ouija boards, tarot cards, and things like that. When it was like, it was right there, it was
Yeah.
a red flag that, whoa, this isn't good. But, looking back at it, I can't believe that I didn't notice that. It's something how we just don't realize what we're doing, and that, like you said, you started seeing this thing, but you still really didn't put it together. Um,
Yeah.
well, maybe at the time, maybe did you at that time figure, wait a minute, this is just not good, or.
Yeah, and it's hard to explain because a lot of people do ask me
Yeah,
that, especially Christians. They're like, "Yeah, but you were raised in the church. How can you not see it?" And even my mum was like, "Yeah, but you knew better." But
yeah,
it's hard to explain because since I was little, it wasn't like I got to 15 and thought, oh, stuff Christianity, I'm going to dive into it. I wasn't being rebellious to Christianity. It was, I grew up with that. I grew up seeing demons. Like, most people hadn't had that experience growing up, where for me, that was comfort. That was, these are the
yes,
spirits that have always been there. This is the atmosphere and environment I'm used to. And so naturally, I was just exploring what I'd already known my whole life. And when I
yeah,
explored it, it turned out that was kind of what I was good at, in like quotation marks. Like, I just felt like that was where my talent lied. And
mhm,
I couldn't understand that if God made us all, I'd never been taught about being born again. So I thought, well, if God made me to be here I am, how could this be evil? So I thought the church had it wrong. They were kind of looking down on things that were actually part of God's creation. And so
yeah,
it's very messed up, like when you say it now, but in the moment, that
yes.
made a lot of sense to me. So, yeah.
Yes, and it is something how you can be blinded by things, and a lot of times there's something on the other side that makes it look good. Like with
Mhm,
you, it was the talent with writing. You would
mhm.
pray for these, a spirit to help you, and sure enough, you was coming out with some writings that even shocked yourself.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I can't believe I wrote this. I mean, it's evil and it's dark, but you just kind of looked at it like, yeah, but it's good though.
Yeah.
So it was almost like it was getting a good talent out of it. Maybe it's not so bad after all, because I'm getting something out of it. But then
Yeah.
after that, there's a price tag to pay, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I guess I saw it as fiction as well. It's not like I was actually going out doing these things or I would approve of them. It was just
Yeah.
a fiction work, and they were selling really well. I was making a lot of money off selling my writing, and that's why I went to university so that I could get a profession in it.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I never really thought, oh, this. I knew it was evil, but I didn't think it was like evil. It was a demonic evil that had spiritual implications. I just thought
Yeah.
it was kind of just a dark story, and that was the end of it.
Yes. Can I ask you, where, what, in whatever state you were in as far as belief wise, like, you went to church and you believed in Jesus and things like that. Okay, now when you had these the bad experiences, say for instance, a bad dream or whatnot, what
Mhm.
did you do for protection? What was your belief in that area?
So, while I was still Christian,
Yeah.
um, when I had bad dreams, I didn't mind because I'd always had them, and
Mm.
I was always interested in horror. So for me, they were actually quite entertaining. And so some mornings I would wake up and I'd write it down, and I
Oh.
would turn it into a story. And that's how my horror stories actually began, because I was writing down my
Oh.
dreams and making them into stories. And actually, when I was in year 6, which is like infant school, so you're about 9 or 10, my stories, and I don't know why the teachers didn't pick up on it, were very, very dark. I remember one time I wrote about how like this man, he died and he came back to haunt his family and then he murdered them all. Like, so they're very dark
Wow.
stories. And yeah, but if I was like the weird kid who like sat at the back of the class and didn't speak, maybe the teachers took it more seriously. But I was quite a bubbly, funny child, confident child, and so
Yeah.
it's just kind of like my dark sense of humor, if you like. And
That's where you even got your ideas, from even some of the things that happened and everything.
yeah.
You mentioned that your mother had brought it to your attention that the paranormal activity that was going on was always when you were there. Can you
Yeah.
explain a little about that?
Yeah, so she knew that I was into dark things, and my mom liked horror movies herself growing up, and so even to this day, she's like, "Oh, I blame myself a little bit because I allowed her to watch horror movies because she just thought it was harmless, it's fiction." And she always
Yeah.
said that as long as the horror movie ended with good overcoming evil, or that the priest cast, the demons out in the name of Jesus, then it was okay because it wasn't
Oh.
glorifying darkness. So that's how she saw it, and so naturally, I grew up watching horror movies with her. Um, but then she noticed, so she wasn't too concerned with my interest in the darkest things until I was obviously a lot older. Um, but yeah, so when I would always hear my name being called, like, I mean, all the time, I was running downstairs, like, yeah, yeah, like, yeah, mom, and I didn't call you. And then,
Mm.
so she used to notice that all the time. She knew that I had seen ghosts and things, and she'd tell me she'd pray over the house.
Yeah.
And if I remember one time, she was like, she said something about demons, and I like cheered, and I did it compulsively. I didn't mean to; it just happened. And she's like, "You freak, like, you scare me sometimes with the things you come out with, like just how
Oh.
impulsive I am." But anyway, yeah, the doors to our house used to open on their own, but not just open, you'd see the handle go down and it would just slowly open and there'd be no breeze in the house. And she'd be like, "Why does this only happen when you're here? Why do your friends only see ghosts when you're in the room?" And so she noticed that I was very sensitive to the spirit world and that things would be attracted to me. And so yeah, she had noticed that.
Did you ever come to a time where you felt isolated, like from family or friends or anything?
Yeah, I think I felt pretty isolated most of my life, to be honest, because it was people saw Earth on such a physical way, which naturally you would. But for me,
Yeah.
most of my experience in life had been supernatural and spiritual,
Yeah.
and so I couldn't really connect with people. And at the time when I was like at university and just before uni, my boyfriend was an atheist, and so I couldn't really share the experience with him of all the things that were going on in the spirit realm that were sometimes, visitations and things like that, because he just wouldn't believe me. My friends didn't really believe in it. So I could only really talk to my mum, but at the same time, I couldn't really talk to her because she would just point me to Jesus, and that for me that wasn't like what I wanted to talk about. And so it was isolating in that way. I kind of just had to keep everything to myself, really.
Yeah. Wow, that's something. And where you mentioned about, you went through the sickness and you knew there was something wrong, but when you went to the doctor and you had these testings and everything, nothing would show up. And,
Hmm.
I've heard that in other people's testimonies, and our family went through that. It was like one of my sons, he was like throwing up blood, and he would go to the bathroom and there would be blood in there. And I mean, we knew something was wrong, and we went to the hospital. They checked him for hemorrhoids. They did everything. They
Mhm.
even went in with the cameras and scopes, and there had been blood, but there was nothing. And it was like, how is this? And they would always tell us, no, there's nothing wrong. And I went through being anorexia and everything, and I lost a lot of weight. And
Mhm.
there was just a lot of different, it's something how they can do that. I know that I do believe that they cause things like cancer and stuff like
Yeah.
that. They can cause true illnesses, but
Yeah.
they can also give you symptoms and everything where there's no, diagnosis to be found of what it is. And it's really something how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I kind of like felt at the time that there was something like in me. I didn't think I was possessed in like the way that I used to see in the movies, but I could tell there was like something like because I just knew my body, like, and I knew that no matter what the doctor said, I knew there was something wrong with me. And when I started to like wake up and there was all blood coming out my mouth and bruises appearing on my body, I looked like I was being beat up, and I was like, I think they're like something's going on. So, yeah, it
I
was
meant
really
to
strange.
ask you about that, the bruises. Like, how did that
Mhm.
happen? What were they like on your arms and things? I wonder if this was like during your sleep.
Yeah, they were all over my legs, and so the man who delivered me said that was very like something he saw common in demonic possession. You see it in the movies as well.
Yeah.
Like the person will look like beaten and torn, and that's how I did look, like big, thick ones, like thick black bruises on my legs, and
Oh my
I was
goodness.
bedbound. I couldn't even get up half most of the day, so I wasn't doing anything to cause them.
I'm sorry to
It's
hear that. I'm
mm.
so glad you're out of it now and everything, really. Because
Yeah, I definitely would have died if I hadn't have kind of came out. Like I was getting towards the end where I was getting ready to die, basically.
and this had to be a lot on your family too, on your mom seeing this and not knowing
Yeah.
what's wrong with her daughter and everything. I mean, she had to be. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I think well, that's what kind of brought me to my deliverance really, because I was on holiday with my boyfriend, in 2017, 2018, for my 21st birthday. And that's where God had slowly started to reveal things to me about what was about to happen in my life, but I just didn't know it at the time. But
Yeah,
anyway, I was still really ill. And one of the nights we went out for a meal and I was really excited, but I ate it and I just couldn't stomach it again. I was really sick. But I was very, very skinny, but I had kind of like a pot belly. Like I had a hard, like kind of bloated belly that used to move all the time. It was very weird.
mm,
Um, and so that was painful. But so I was trying to like eat this food and I couldn't, and I was all swollen and in pain. And I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I am dying. I can't do this. And my breathing was so, so bad. It always felt like something heavy was sitting on my chest and something was on my shoulders. I was just felt
oh,
like I was being weighed down all the time. I was like,
yeah,
Mom, I don't even know if I'm going to make this holiday. Like, I'm so ill. And she kind of put the phone down and she said I think she said she was crying and she just like prayed and was like, God, please just, we need answers, whether it's a
yeah,
serious diagnosis. I don't care at this point. Like, just please, what is wrong with my daughter? And that's when she heard it's spiritual. And
yeah,
she says that she just it clicked for her and that made sense. She's like, of course it's spiritual. Like she's into such dark things, and obviously she didn't know to the extent of it, but she
yeah,
knew that I was doing a lot of horror writing, and
yeah.
so she went to speak to a guy that she knew who was an ex-occultist and said, "Can you pray for my daughter?" And that's how it came about.
Now, didn't you say that there was a time where you were attracted to blood?
Yeah. So I don't know what age that started, but I think it was shortly after I kind of gave my life to Satan, if you like. And as I was kind of saying that demonic prayer, I just felt the urge to shed blood. And so I did. And after that, it's a mix of two things, really. One of it was because I was so emotionally numb to everything in life.
Yeah,
Um, and I literally went from being a very sensitive, compassionate person, over emotional, to feeling nothing at all. That was
mm,
like I kind of felt a bit weird for that, and I wanted to feel something. So when I used to cut myself, I used to actually feel alive. It used to make me feel alive. But
Yeah.
so I actually quite liked the feeling. But then when I saw the blood, I liked the look of blood, I liked the feel of it, the taste of it. And I was obsessed with death and blood. Those are the two things that I was very attracted to, which I didn't shout about because I knew that was very weird things to
Yeah.
be attracted to. But yeah, I just, even when I wasn't in the mood to cut, I'd have to do it just to see blood. I felt like I deserved to shed it. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I had a very strong attraction to that. And with death as well, like when I was 16, the first job I wanted to apply for was in a morgue. I wanted to be around dead people. Like that was where I, I thrived.
Yeah. And you know that I'm sure that this also helped you a lot in your writings too, didn't it?
Hmm.
Talking
Yeah.
about blood and death and things.
Yeah, well, like I said, a lot of the writings I blanked out for, so I didn't really know what I was writing about. But now
Uh,
looking back at it, it's interesting because near enough all of them mention sin, blood, death, souls. Like it's all like, and demons. Like it's all linked to spirituality, and so I found that quite
mm,
interesting.
wow. And where did you have these writings? Did you say that were they published writings?
So I used to do ghostwriting, so I'd write for other people. So I would just basically do it
Yeah.
freelance, and I don't know what's become of them, to be honest. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know where they are in the world. But yeah, so I did that, and then the rest of it's kind of just in my automatic writing book where I just write them down.
And that must bother you, doesn't it? Because I know oh, this other lady, Doreen Virtue,
Yeah.
where she has the writings from before, and there's some of them that she can't even get, take down
Hmm.
because I don't know, I forget exactly why, but I know that there's some that she couldn't take down, and it bothers her to this day. That there's some out there that people are reading, and it
Hmm.
really really hurts her.
Yeah. Well, someone asked me the other day, actually, they heard my testimony on Patrick's channel, and
Yeah.
they said to me, like, oh, just out of interest, can I read some of your stories? Like, just to see the change in you, or just to see what automatic writing under demonic influence looks like. So I
Mm,
looked on my old laptop to look at them,
yeah.
and I hadn't looked for them for at some time, and I just couldn't. I said, sorry, no, I can't. They're
Yeah, I
just
don't
so
blame
horrible.
you.
It
Yeah.
includes child torture, necrophilia, and just horrible things. And I said, I'm not going to show you, sorry.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good that you did that because it just makes you think, about,
Hmm.
oh, what was that? Um, the piece of paper, the drawings, the one with the demon over their eyes. Can you
Yeah.
explain that?
Yeah, so that was so I used to doodle as well, automatic doodle, if that's a thing. That's what I
Yeah,
used to do. I used to like do sketches and then kind of
yeah.
look afterwards, and there's always some form of demon. And I'm not an artist by any means, but there were sketches. And after my deliverance, the deliverance man minister said he described three specific demons that came out to me, and he said what they looked like, and he described it as a dark shadow kind of hovering over me or leaning over me. And I always knew that was there. I could always feel something dark and heavy
Mm,
hanging over me, so I knew he was there.
yeah.
And he described something kind of at the side of me. And then he described the Kundalini spirit of the snake kind of coiling from beneath me, coming up me. And he described them all as spewing over me, like being sick. And he described what that meant, but I can't quite remember.
Yeah.
But anyway, he told me, and I didn't think too much of it until a while later, where I was looking through my automatic writing book. And I hadn't, this was the first time I was looking at it as a Christian through fresh eyes. And the very first page, I saw the doodle of me crying, a dark shadow over me, a snake beneath me, and something on the side of me, all being sick over me. So
Oh, wow.
in that doodle, the demons were literally drawing who they were in the spirit realm. And I mean, I was just like,
Oh,
wow, this is crazy. And I
wow.
showed my mom, and I showed the deliverance minister, and I was like, I mean, you can't get any more clear than
And
this.
the
Like,
one with his hand over your eyes, that's what got
mhm.
me. I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
So I had another doodle where you could see, like, I was kind of chained to, I just chained down, and I had a demon hanging over my eyes, like pressing into my eyes. And the deliverance
Mm,
minister, obviously, he'd never seen these ever. No one had ever seen these drawings. And he
yeah.
described that I was possessed through my eyes, which made sense because I was watching
Oh,
horror all the time. And
yes,
so,
yes.
yes,
That's a
it's like,
gateway.
yeah, it's a gateway. So that was kind of like showing how they were over my eyes and why I couldn't probably see things for the way they were because I was
Mhm.
blinded to it.
Yes. Isn't that something? Because it is so
Mhm,
true, and it can literally be right there. Because after you
mhm.
doodled it, you had to seen it, but you didn't realize what you were looking at, and it's something
No.
it's really powerful on the enemy side, how he can actually blind us to things, and it could
Mhm.
be, like, in our face, and we not even realize what we're doing, what we're looking at, you know?
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's, like, right there in black and white and didn't even realize, I mean, it's so crazy, when you think about it, how much
Mhm.
he can blind us,
Yeah.
and I mean, that's how he operates. It's through
Mhm.
deception, and it's pretty strong deception.
I was attracted as much as I was attracted to it, it was like it was attracted to me, and so naturally, it made me attracted to it even more because it was revealing itself to me, whereas for God, I wanted to be there, but he wasn't at the time of
Yeah,
I felt revealing himself to me, so that's why I went into it.
and it's something how you had mentioned that you wanted this a God to reveal himself to you,
Mhm.
and but when you think about it, with the Bible and what it tells us, it says that we need to have faith in Jesus. See, we don't need to have him to prove himself. We faith comes by hearing the word of God,
Yeah.
not by asking a spirit to reveal themselves to us. Yeah, it is hard for people to understand, but it's also not good to question, really,
Mhm.
because who are we, to question God, like, why did you do this? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
All we should know is he is who he is, and how great he is, and that he did reach in and he pulled us out of the darkness, and that's
Mhm.
good. So can you explain what happened and how it led to your deliverance and what happened?
Yeah, so after my mum, like, said that prayer and had it spiritual and spoke to the deliverance minister, I'll call him John, his name's John, who's this ex-occultist. He was quite, like, very involved, his story is amazing. So, I came back from holiday, um, and like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of God was kind of revealing to me what was gonna happen to me, but I didn't know at the time. So, for instance, just before I left to go on holiday, I went to the cinemas with my boyfriend, and we went to see The Nun, which is this horror movie. And like I said, I watched horror all the time. Like this was very, very tame in my eyes compared to what I was used to. And there's this one scene where the nun had like this blood of Jesus, but like it was a demonic nun, and she was holding it up to the screen. And as this scene played out, it was just like I heard a voice, and I don't know if it was God, and I'm not sure, but it wasn't my voice. It was a male voice, and it just said, "This is evil." And suddenly I felt a heaviness in the room, and it's the same heaviness I always used to feel around demonic activity. And I was like, "Whoa!" And it's just like a different part of my brain like started to work, where I was like telling myself, "This, Demi, this is not good." Like, and I just become aware. And so I kind of heard myself say that, and then I snapped back out of it, like, don't be so silly. Like this is like what I always do. And so I kind of ignored it and carried on watching it. Anyway, I went on holiday with my boyfriend. On the second night, on the Tuesday evening, I was asleep and I had a dream of being in church, which was unusual in itself. I never ever used to dream I was in church. But I was in church and the pastor put her hand out to pray over someone and do a deliverance in the front row. And as she did that, I started to manifest and have a deliverance. And I was actually shaking and trembling in my dream, and my boyfriend had to wake me up and be like, calm me down. And I was like, oh, what's going on? He went, oh, you were really like compulsive. And I was like, oh. And so I didn't tell him much about it because I didn't think much of it. So then the next morning, I was lying on the sunbed, reading Patrick's book, which was about horror. And it was a Christian book, obviously, but I didn't really know that. My mom just gave it to me to read. And so I was just interested in the horror parts. Anyway, I finished reading that and I was put on some worship music, and I still listen to worship music because I still believed in Creator God, and I loved, Creator God and worshiping Him,
Yeah.
as long as it didn't mention Jesus. And so I was listening, and I think actually one of the songs did, but this time I was just listening and weeping. and my hands felt like they were glued to the sunbed. They were so heavy, and I felt so light and at peace, and I was just crying my eyes out. And then when the music stopped and Marilyn Manson came on, and my normal like heavy metal music, I kind of snapped out of it, and I was like, "How stupid am I?" And I started like wiping my tears, and yeah, I just kind of got over it. So that happened, and then towards the end of the week, it was my actual birthday where I turned 21, and I've been waiting all week to go to this horror house where you walk through and people jump out at you and things. I was so excited. I used to love these. They didn't scare me at all. I used to just think they were really funny. So we walked in, and as soon as we walked in, I felt that same evil presence, like saying, "This is evil. You need to leave." And I was like, I heard that voice again. I was like, "What?" And so I told my boyfriend, "We need to get out." He was like, "Don't be so silly. We've just paid to go in." I was like, "No, we need to leave." So we left. And as soon as I left, I was like, I just snapped out of it. I was like, no, sorry, let's go back in. Like, what am I doing? And so we went in again. And then about 10 seconds or a minute in, or a bit more into it, I was like, no, we need to get back out. Like, this is horrible. And I actually like told them to stop and get me out. And I'd never done that in my life. And so we got out, and I called my mom. I was like, "Mom, you're never going to believe I've just done." Like, I couldn't even do the horror house. And I felt really embarrassed and stupid. And I didn't know what came over me. And it was just so out of character. So anyway, continued holiday, had all these like out of character experiences. I came home the next day, and it was a Monday, and my mom was like, the first thing my mom said to me was like, "Oh, yeah, you're gonna." I spoke to John. I didn't know who John was, but she's like, "I spoke to John. He's coming to pray for you tomorrow." And I was like, "Oh, like why?" And apparently, I already agreed to this, and that she'd already told me, but I have absolutely no memory at all of her asking, and it would be very out of character for me to agree to it as well. But apparently I did, and so I was like, okay, but I wasn't happy about it when she told me. And so the next day came. This was a Tuesday, and I went to dinner with my friend, and I was kind of like laughing about it with her, saying, "Oh, I'm going to have prayer now," and we're kind of just making the mickey out of it. But as I got in the car, to drive back home, I started to shake, and I was so nervous and like just really terrified, and my teeth were chattering. I was like, Demi, what's going on? Like, it's just prayer. Like, it's literally nothing. Two outcomes. Either I get healed, and that's a good thing, or nothing happens at all, and that's fair enough. I can say to Mom, "I've tried you, but nothing happened." And so I got home, and 6 o'clock came, and John came, and I just remember being so nervous. And John was like this big guy, like 6 foot something, and he came in with a smaller lady, an older lady. And again, I don't know any of them. And he looked at me and he said, "Something big's going to happen tonight. I haven't felt this nervous in a long time." And I was just like, okay, like, who's this guy? And so he sat down and he looked at me. And as soon as he looked at me, my shoulder started to jolt backwards on its own. And I looked at it, and it was the weirdest feeling, because I'd never not had control of my body like this. And so I started to watch that kind of twitch away. And he called me into the middle of the room to pray for me. And my mum said that I started to be really rude and mocking. And this was very out of character for me, even though, I thought Christianity was nonsense. I would never be rude to somebody, especially in front of my mum, who was a guest in our house. But yeah, so she said you've been very mocking and you're rolling your eyes and things. And again, I don't remember that. So he was praying in English over me. But then as soon as he started to speak in tongues, I just flew off the chair, and I started to distort and manifest. And then I just blacked out. And so, yeah, that's
Wow.
That's how it happened.
That's something. And the demons knew, didn't they? They knew. There's a lot of people that when you tell them something like this, they're like, oh, so many people doesn't really believe in deliverance and when you go through it, you know,
Yeah.
it's not, in your imagination or whatever. But yeah, it's very real. And people just need to know, once you've went through it, it's like the manifestation of both worlds, of God and of the enemy. And when them two collide, I mean, it's very powerful. But God always wins, as we both know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's amazing and very good to hear that. I'm very happy to hear it. So with your your experience and everything, and coming away from that experience, what all have you
Mhm.
how's it affected your life?
Um, I guess, I mean, the first major difference is obviously I'm a completely new person to who I used to be,
Mhm.
which was the weirdest thing the next day when I woke up. That was the strangest thing for me because I lost my identity. And, for 21 years I'd been into horror, and I was studying horror at uni, and I was always dressed in black. And suddenly, it's not that I didn't want to do those things, that just interest just wasn't in me, as though it never existed. And so I
Mhm.
was like, who am I? This is the weirdest feeling ever. I didn't know who I was. Um,
Yeah.
and so when I finally, because I didn't become a Christian straight away, that was took another encounter for God for that to happen, because I really didn't want to be one. But when that happened and I became born again, I was just like, your life's different, because Christianity is no longer just rules, that are written in a book. The rules that are written on your heart, and you live out your life differently, and you see the world differently. I just remember being full of so much love and compassion. And
Yes.
so it changes your life, because you see the world just differently. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true, and I definitely understand what you went through as far as
Mm-hmm.
that goes, because it was just it, and you explained it better than anyone I've ever heard. But
Okay.
it's not only something like you don't like it anymore. It was truly like it never existed.
Yeah, and it's such a weird experience, because like it's not a common one, so you don't know how
Yeah.
to describe it.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just remember thinking, like, who am I? Because all this thing has been taken away from me. So yeah, it was very strange.
So you said after that you had another um, how do I say this? Another encounter where God really did come in and save you
Ye-
again, in
Yeah,
a sense. You know what I mean?
yeah, because after the deliverance, I was just like, what on earth has just happened to me? It was only supposed to be a half an hour prayer, and it turned into this 3 hour traumatic experience, really. Like, it was traumatic.
Like a war
Um,
zone.
yeah, it was awful. It was just like, you see these things in movies, but you never think it's going to be you ever. And so I'm just like shook up and traumatized.
Yeah,
Um, and so I was like, okay, well, I remember texting my friend straight after it saying, I think Christianity might be true. And I couldn't really go into details, because how do you tell your friend who doesn't believe in God that?
yeah,
But I remember that was the first thing I said to somebody. And that concerned me, because I was thinking, first of all, I don't want to be a Christian. I spent the last 6 years, I thought I knew what Christianity was. And I
yeah,
spent the last 6 years trying to get away from it and trying to change my image so that people didn't treat me like a goody goody Christian. and
yeah,
so, and then the second thing was that I had been mocking Jesus for the last 6 years, really, really bad and vulgar. And so I thought, well, if Christianity is true, I'm in big trouble. And
yeah,
so I kind of went back to uni a few days later, and I wanted nothing to do with the devil, but I also wanted nothing to do with God. I was done with the spirit world. I thought, right, I'm just going to live in the physical. But
yeah,
then in the physical, I didn't really know who I was. And so it was a very weird time in my life. So I just drank a lot of the time, because that was the biggest way that I would escape from life, and partied. And that was kind of my response. Um,
oh,
and I did that for a while, but obviously it was still in the back of my head, because you can't, as much as you drink, you still can't black out what's just happened to you. It's not a normal thing to go through.
yeah,
And so it was still in the back of my mind, and I was still questioning, like, was that God? Like, do I, what do I do from here? And so one night as I was like still questioning things, and the biggest thing I was still questioning was, if it is real, does God still want something to, want to like something to do with me, because I'm drinking now? And so I went to my hotel where I worked, and there's this lady. It was a very, very busy night, and there's this lady in the corner. I wasn't even her waitress. And I just happened to pass her like very quickly, and she stopped me. She went, sorry to stop you, but you just look like a very interesting person. I need to talk to you. I was like, do I? And so we started speaking, and she was just saying, like, what's your name, what do you study at uni, and we just got into a casual conversation. But then she started asking very specific questions, like, but what are you writing about at uni? What story are you writing right now? I thought, this is like not the time to start asking all these specific questions. I was really busy. But
yeah,
I told her, and I was just like, oh, well, I'm kind of writing like a horror story, but like in a Christian way, but I wasn't really sure. Because at the time, because I had to still study horror, I was just kind of rewriting a horror story, but kind of writing about my deliverance, like making a nice ending to do with God. So I
Yeah.
kind of told this lady that's what I was doing. And she's like, "Oh, are you a Christian?" I was like, "Well, I don't really know what I am actually. Like, I've just left the occult." And she went, "Oh, well, I'm a Christian. And I left the occult." And she went, "So I'm going to send you something." And I was like, "Okay." So I walked away thinking that was a bit like of a weird coincidence. That's a bit odd, but I didn't think
Yeah.
nothing of it. And then a few weeks later, at my workplace, I received 2 books. And one was Spiritual House Cleansing, how to clean your house from demons and things. And the next one was a testimony. And it was a very, very specific testimony that, was sent for a reason, but I won't get into that. It was very relevant. But inside the book, she had written her number. And so I sent her a little text just saying, "Thank you for the books. I appreciate it." And then she sent me a voice message back saying, "I know this is going to sound really strange, but I was booked into another hotel in that area, and I booked it, paid for it and everything, and then I just felt the urge to pray. And as I was praying, I heard God tell me to specifically go to, and then she named the hotel where I was working, and she said I'd never even heard of this hotel before, but I knew I had to go there. So I went, and I came there on the night, and I didn't know what I was doing there. But as I looked up, I heard God say, "That's her. That's who you need to talk to." And I was
Wow.
just like listening to this thing, and I'd never encountered anything like this in my life. And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh,
Wow.
that's very, very strange." And so that brought, God and Christianity back to the forefront of my mind because I've been trying to suppress it. And so I was like, "Okay, let's start going to church and let's start, going to the CU and just just talk to someone about it." And so I did. But then as I went there, they just didn't understand what I'd went through. They made me feel really silly, and I walked out feeling actually quite embarrassed
Mm.
and discouraged. And so again, it
Oh,
put me back in the place where actually I don't want to know anything about Christianity. They're the same kind of people that I was used to growing up in church that made me not want to go to church.
yeah.
so, and
And
so
so,
yeah, um, so I did that, and so I carried on living my life again, but I still couldn't get this encounter with the lady out of my mind. And so one night I was like, "God, I just wanted to know the answer once and for all." I was like, "God, if you are there and you are listening, and Jesus, if that was you who delivered me, and you're still with me even though I'm drinking, like, can you just show me that you haven't left me, that you're still with me? And if I know that it really, really was you and you really are here, then sure, I will give my life to you." Not that you should give God an
yeah.
ultimatum like that, but I did.
Yeah.
And so I did. But I really cried, I didn't say it lightly. I really cried my heart out. I really wanted to know what was going on because it was such
Yes.
a confusing time. And so I woke up the next morning and there was a parcel by my door. And this was a new location for me. I hadn't long moved to this place. So I opened it up and there was a cross inside and a note saying, "Keep Jesus close." And I thought,
Wow.
well, who's that from? And I thought, well, maybe it's my mom because that's the only Christian I knew. And so I
Yeah.
texted my mom, like, "Oh, did you send me this?" But she didn't put her name on, so I thought it was strange. And she said, "No, that's not me." I thought, "Oh,
Oh,
well." Yeah, so I thought, who on earth could this be? So anyway, I found out it was a lady from my mum's house group. I'd never met in my life. I'd never had any contact with her. And I don't
yeah.
even know how she really got my details. But yeah, it turned out that she sent it me because, and when my mum finally got in touch with her, she went, "Oh yeah, I just had it on my heart to pray for her and that she needed to receive it." So I thought that was strange. But anyway, I kind of like thought it was a coincidence, didn't think too much of it, although it was quite strange. But then within like an hour or two later, my mum received a text message off a lady that I used to, and I can't remember if she used to be my Sunday school teacher or if I just knew her from church. But anyway, I knew her from church from when I was little, and I hadn't seen her since I was young. I don't know, not very young.
Yeah.
And I hadn't got her on Facebook or anything, so we've not been in contact for years and years. But anyway, she was praying or she was in worship. And as she was doing this, a song appeared on her phone and she heard God clearly tell her it had to be sent to me. And so she texted my mum saying, "Hi, I know this is so random, but could you please forward this to her daughter? Because God's just told me your daughter needs to hear it." And so my mum sent
Oh,
me the song and said, "Hi, Demi, does this song have any relevance to you?" So I played the song and it's a Christian song singing, "You're not alone. I'm with you. I haven't left you. I'm still beside you." And
oh,
after just receiving that cross and saying that
yeah.
prayer the night before, and it's just everything
Mm,
added up and just clicked in that moment. Like God had been
yeah.
really trying to like push his, like show me he's there, and I just started
Yeah.
crying, and I was like, yes, God.
That is something. When those things happen, I've had things like that happen. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really something when it does happen. You know, when it happens, you know, because you're
Mm-hmm.
like, that had to be God. And it feels so good, doesn't it? It just makes you know that you're really not alone and that He really is there, and that
Yeah.
He's there to help you and everything. But, when you, after your deliverance, and you still was, you still had other things going on and
Mm-hmm.
everything. I did the same thing, so you're not alone in that. I had the same thing, but mine was drug use, and I
Mm-hmm.
still had that going on, and I was like, I kept praying, God, help me with it, and then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly I felt a big lump in my breast, and I went and I was going to get a biopsy, and I
Mm-hmm.
prayed to God. I mean, I was so worried, and I kept praying to God, please, don't let this be cancer, and I prayed to Him, and I says, look, I will follow you all the days of my life if you help me with this and everything, and I will stop the drug use no matter what I have to do. I'll do it. I'll stop it. Well, the day after my biopsy, I went to a place, to get detox and get help and everything. And I mean, I was determined. I was like, no, I promise God, and that's what I'm going to do. And after
Mm-hmm.
that, boy, I mean, my eyes were still open, from
Mm-hmm.
my deliverance and when I, accepted the Lord and everything. But it's almost like onion. I've heard that before, that it's almost like peeling an onion. God helps us and helps us shed those things,
Yeah.
that still has a hold of us. And I'm wondering, the way you described it, if you had a problem with understanding God's grace and forgiveness, because you know how you kept saying, well, I blasphemed Him so long, I really felt like, oh, He'll be angry with me probably.
Yeah.
And you just didn't feel
Mm-hmm.
deserve it even. But God's grace is sufficient, and
Mm-hmm.
and everything, and He does forgive. That's the good thing, it's good news. And that's why it's good news, and He accepts us and loves us.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's wonderful that you finally come to that place and everything. And that song probably was something you really needed to hear, I'm sure. So,
Yeah. And that's what
um,
did it. Like when I heard those lyrics, I was just like, wow, like this is, it just felt like God was speaking to me.
and what
And I
was
was
the
like,
name of the song again?
and it's called You're Not Alone. And I can't think who sings it, but it's a lady. Um,
Oh,
and it's a beautiful song. And it's just what I needed to hear in that moment.
really curious to hear that. But that sounds
Mhm.
wonderful. It really does. And your testimony is so powerful, Demi. As soon as I heard that, I was like, I really want to talk to her. I want to be able to, because I'm starting my new podcast and everything. And I was like, she would be a wonderful first guest. And I really appreciate you doing that. I really do. And I know deep down that it's going to help people once they hear it. And it's so weird that during your time coming out of the occult, you come across Laura Maxwell's testimony. And
Mhm.
I think that is so amazing because I heard her testimony right before I come out of it. And it was so powerful. And I was like, oh man, it just gave me that urgency, like I said, in my spirit, that I needed to get out of doing what I was doing. And it
Mhm.
really opened my eyes about these spirits and all that I thought was there helping me, with people and
Yeah.
everything. But they're really
Yeah.
not our friend. The enemy,
Mhm.
Satan is our enemy, and we never should embrace him. you know but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just like, I realized that afterwards, like, because after I became Christian and became committed, like, I still had attacks from visitations from demons, because they do
Mhm.
say that when you leave the occult, they don't like it, and so they come after you, and that's what it
Yes.
felt like. They were really coming after me, and I was actually scared this time. My whole life, I hadn't been scared of demons because I saw them as my friends, but now I understood that they weren't my friends. It freaked me out, and
Yeah.
so so I'd have to say the name of Jesus, and they would go, but it would be like, but it was then that I realized, that they were seen through Christian eyes. I could see that they were evil. I could see they were out to get me, that they weren't my friends. And,
Yeah.
and it had to be God to show me that, which,
How did the attacks finally stop?
um, I mean, if they got less severe, and I don't know why that is. I just maybe I'm not
Was
sure. But
you were praying about it and everything though?
in yeah, like in the moment when they would happen, all I'd have to do is so many times I woke myself up shouting Jesus in my sleep, and it would
Yes.
go.
Yes.
Sometimes I remember the one time I did get the sleep paralysis. I have reached out and I touched the Bible because I couldn't speak, and as soon as I touched the Bible, that it stopped.
It left.
And
Oh
so
wow.
yeah, and I think I was just constantly playing worship music all the time, like always singing
Yeah.
praise over,
Yeah.
in the atmosphere, and I think naturally it just repelled them, and so
Yeah. Yes.
it's fine.
You know, a lot of, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But I know that a lot of people, a lot of believers, a lot of them have a problem with believing, like when once you get your deliverance and you get saved, that
Mhm.
these spirits never bother you again. And sometimes
Mhm.
really start tormenting people. Sometimes people do need them still cast out, and a lot of
Mhm.
people don't believe that, but it's true because I've seen it and I've experienced it. But sometimes they do. They didn't with me, but well, I can't really say that. I mean, the activity stopped, but there was a time, probably within the first year, and I had a couple dreams. And in the dream, I was trying to rebuke it in the name of Jesus, but I
Mhm.
couldn't say the word Jesus. It was literally
Mhm.
like freezing my mouth. It's weird, the experience I had, but it happened like three times, and like the third time I finally was able to do it, and it stopped. But it is something how they come back and they try to, then
Mhm.
they're mad and they try to torment you.
Yeah, I remember I did the same. I had nightmares, and they would always say, "You're not really delivered. We're still here. We're not leaving you. You're one of us." Like they'd always say things like that, and
Oh,
I'd have to keep shouting like Jesus, Jesus, and they
yeah.
would go straight away. But like it was really horrible. The one time, I was I was committed at this point, I think, and I went to the doctors, and I hadn't been to the doctors since when I was possessed, when I was always at the doctor for being ill. But now I was here like as a Christian, and I walked in. It was very, very early in the morning, and so there wasn't many people there. I think there was one person at the back, and then there was one person on the second row. So I went and sat in front of him, and I was in the waiting room for quite a while. Um, and I remember looking at the time because my appointment was running late. But the guy who behind me had been in there longer than me. And as I was sitting waiting, the guy behind me leaned forward, whispered in my ear, "Maybe it's a demon," in the most demonic voice, and then got up and
Oh,
walked out. And I was like, and I just froze because it was a horrible, horrible voice he said it in.
oh,
And
wow.
I turned around and he just vanished. And I saw him walk out, but I didn't see him go left or right. So I don't know if he did walk out or whether he genuinely vanished. I'm not sure. But
Mm.
it's interesting because obviously when I was ill all the time, it was because of demons. And now I'm back in the doctors, and it was just for a checkup. But subconsciously in my mind, I always associated the doctors with, how I was always ill.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I just found it weird that he would lean forward and say that. And
Yeah.
also, he was there to see the doctor. Why would he wait the whole time? The full like 15, 20 minutes in the waiting room just to say that in my ear and walk out. It was very
Yeah,
bizarre.
that is bizarre. Like they say, angels are messengers. Well, the enemy is a messenger too. I mean,
Yeah.
he's here to deceive and to give his messages, and it would not surprise me one bit if that was a demon
Mhm.
manifesting to give you that message. But that's
Yeah.
something. So now, though, how's your health? Is everything okay now?
Yeah, it's fine. The only times like I've had like weird things happen is when I sit down to like write my story, or like
Mm,
especially when I very first started to do it a couple of years ago,
yeah.
like to write my book. Like the weirdest, like I'd get weird marks, and the weirdest thing happened actually. When I very first started to write it, I noticed I started to get these like blood marks on me, like specks under my skin all over me.
Mm.
And that's something that happened back when I was ill, and I was like, "What are these?" And I googled it, and you should never Google it. But it's saying like if it starts to go purple, like that's like a bad sign because I've like blood clotting and whatnot, and it was
Oh,
started to like spread over my skin. So I was like, "Oh," and I showed my mum, she's like, "Yeah, that's bad. You need to get to the hospital." So I
yeah.
went to hospital, and they did all the tests. And went, "No, we've never seen anything like this. There's like we don't know what it
Wow.
is." And I was like, "Oh." So I told my friend, and my friend, it was like the night before we'd been talking about like because he was Christian, and we've been talking about spiritual things was in demonic attacks. And as I told him what happened, he sent me a photo, and the same mark was on his skin as well.
What?
So we both had this same mark on our skin. And so we said a prayer, and the next day it's gone off both of us. It was the strangest thing.
Wow. I was going to say, when you do write your book, which I highly encourage you to do so, because, like I said, there's so much power in testimony. And I say
Mm-hmm.
that because, there's a verse in the Bible where Jesus delivered the demoniac. And the
Mm-hmm.
demoniac, after he was healed and delivered, he asked Jesus if he could follow him. Jesus told him no. He said, go back and tell the people what I've done for you. So Jesus wants us to go tell people about our testimony and stuff. And there's nothing better than to glorify God. And your book would definitely do that. And what I was going to suggest is every time you go to sit down and do it, pray. Pray for God to protect you and to give you the words to say. Just do it in a way. Just ask Him the Holy Spirit to guide you, and
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it would be great. I can't wait. And as soon as you do complete your book and you publish it, let us know. I really want to know and get a copy.
I will do. It was like kind of hard because it was kind of like stories like Laura and that kind of pushed me to
Mhm.
do it. And Patrick, like Patrick played such a big part because
Yeah.
I, I left the occult. I went to church. People thought I was crazy, and so I was thinking, well, am I crazy? And it wasn't until I
Yes.
started to read, like, I remember reading Patrick's story again as a Christian, and I was like, hang on,
Mm.
all these things happened to me, these exact experiences, and so I
Yeah.
felt less crazy in life because naturally I'm a very private person, and I don't like to put my life out there. I like to just kind of for no one to know me and to just be
Yeah.
anonymous. But I was praying about it, but then I've kind of felt like, yeah, but this story isn't about me. It's not what I've done. I'm not exactly painting myself in a great way in the book either. It's about what God's done. It's His story. It's not my story. So, and that's kind of what's encouraging me. And just knowing that there might be other people out there who read my book, and just to know that I can make someone else feel less crazy is comforting.
Yes.
I really needed that. And I think
Yeah.
as well, you don't get a lot of British people. Like Laura's the only British person I know. A lot of the stories that I read, and especially the testimonies online, are American. And so yeah, I just
Yeah.
think it'd be nice, because I'm sure it happens in Britain, but it's just
Yes.
not spoken about.
Which, by the way, I love your accent. I
Thank
love
you.
Laura's too. Y'all both have beautiful accents. I would love to hear you both talk like in an interview. I would love to hear it. But yeah, and speaking about books, I just want to throw this out there because it's such a good book. Is Mark Cummins, and I would even encourage you to read it, Demi. It's called
Mhm,
Seeing Ghosts Through God's Eyes, and it talks about these spirits and how they mimic the dead and they mimic the living too. But his
mhm,
his book is such a good case against that belief, and it really, really showed me a lot of stuff. It was really good. But it's called Seeing Ghosts Through God's Eyes by Mark Hunman. So he's a
okay,
very gentle, very sweet, humble man too. He's
mhm,
a true man of God. And but yeah, so that's wonderful. And like I said, let us know when your book is done and completed. I would love to get a copy and read it
I will
myself.
do.
So yeah, because I know people, they put so much more information in their books. They compile information,
Yeah.
to put in their
Well,
books.
that's what it is, because I was like telling people the story verbally, but if I wanted to tell them the whole thing to really get the full picture, it would take me like hours. And I would get
Yeah.
like, I was telling someone before, and I actually lost my voice by the end of it. And I was like, you know what? I wish I could just give someone a book and say, here, just read it. And so
Yeah.
that's what I want to do.
Well, that's wonderful. So it's been great, you coming on and sharing your testimony, and I'm so happy that you was on our episode number 1. So
It's
I'm
a
going to be
privilege. Thank
having more
you.
episodes coming out. So I'm going to encourage all the listeners to subscribe to my channel. It's Spiritual Realities with Dana Emanuel. So and then on my Facebook too, if anybody wants to add me, they can, or and that way I'll also put them out on there when I get new episodes that come out. So. But anyway, God bless you, Demi. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the listeners before we go?
No, I just hope that it encourages people,
Yeah.
and yeah, I hope that it
Okay.
reaches the people who need to hear it.
Okay. Yep, I do too. I hope so. I really do. So anyway, I will let you go. It's been a pleasure and nice to meet you too and
You too.
everything. So but we will see you again sometime.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Well, you take care and God bless you, Demi. You have a
You
good
too.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.